This episode of the Linux Action Show is brought to you by the good-looking folks at GoDaddy.com. Use our code Linux and save yourself some cash. Welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 24, Episode 2. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey there, Matt. Should I tell the folks about the big show?
Let's hear it.
This is a packed show this week. So we've been promising this one for a while. We're finally able to deliver, and boy, is it going to be worth it. In the second half of the show, we're going to run down some of the things we do to make our home Linux servers awesome. If you've been thinking about doing a home server, or if you already have one and you feel like you're not getting enough, you want something valuable, right?
Oh,
that thing's sitting there, it's running, it's taking power.
It's already taking up the real estate. I want some.
Let's make it useful, right?
Yeah.
So a ton of good stuff in there, especially if you're a cord cutter. Stay tuned for that. Of course, in the news segment, we're going to cover the big hoopla with Mark Shuttleworth, and that just went everywhere this week.
Goodness.
And also the kerfuffle between Nvidia and the kernel devs continues, and I think I figured it out. So I'm going to break down what really this is all about, and it's kind of silly.
A little bit of high school drama?
A little bit. So we'll be covering that. Of course, we've also got feedback at the end of the show. But first, it's our pick segment, Matt.
All right.
Why don't I start with our Runs Linux pick this week?
All right, let's start off.
First up, check this out. The bento box will run Linux. Now this, Matt, don't get too excited. It's a concept device.
I was going to say, it looks kind of cool.
So if you're familiar with, say, like a sushi bento box where you've got multiple compartments, right?
Yeah.
Then so picture that, and then fill those compartments with various gadgetry. So for the keyboard, you have a touchpad tablet, 11-inch OLED tablet. Then for storage, you have a 1 terabyte SSD drive, which is removable, and then it can connect it as a USB device. Your mouse is a 4-inch OLED smartphone that's plugged in. It can charge the whole system. It charges with the whole system, and it also has on the other like rest area for your wrist. It has solar panels.
Well, that's interesting.
It's claiming by 2014. So in the first iteration, they're going to have a 10-hour battery life.
Right.
And then by 2014, they'll have an 80-hour battery life, they think, with 8 terabytes of storage.
Whoa.
Now, you see, this whole thing is changeable. So by default, it runs with a keyboard. But then if you run, say, like a music application, it flips in a piano, and then it puts the music notes up on the screen. Now, in this screenshot here, they're running Windows 7, but their specs actually listed as Linux-based. So you could tell how far out there this is when they're not. I mean, they're using icons of applications they don't have, like Skype and Photoshop. They're saying it's going to run Linux, but they're showing screenshots of Windows. It's solar power charged, but it's a very cool design, and one that I don't think is probably more than 6-7 years out. From somebody?
Yeah.
From somebody that's going to
Well, I think if they can get the hardware stuff figured out, I think this is, I think that's pretty cool.
I like the idea of all these devices working in concert, but you do wonder, like, you would actually need the operating system to sort of, I would think, divvy out the workload amongst the mini processors, because then you'd kind of have, like, you'd have the processor in the screen, you have the processor in the tablet, and you have the processor in the smartphone. Okay, well, those could be multi-core devices, so then you could actually have quite a bit of cores. But if when everything's docked, it's using the one single processor, you're going to be constrained for power.
Well, I don't think any of this would be that far out there, really. I mean, just other than the funding. I can't see why this would be that difficult to do.
So,
I mean, even with the technology of it, really?
It's a concept by Renu Wu Ramlee, I believe is how you say his name. They say it's a plausible scenario. It's something he wants himself. It's going to be completely customizable, so each component will be selectable. It'd be the main screen would be 15-inch OLED with the 11-inch tablet breakout and a 4-inch phone, and they claim solar power for the charging. We'll see.
I mean,
I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Is it vaporware? Is it real? This is vaporware I want, so hopefully it does come to fruition. That'd be cool.
Well, Matt, I have got a Android app pick that ties in with our server segment this week, but also works for anybody that uses services like Google and things like that. And the distro pick is a very cool, pleasant surprise. That I kind of came across this week when I went out on a quest, and I'm really excited to share it with folks.
Cool.
So I can't wait to tell you all about that. But first, I want to tell you all about GoDaddy.com, the fine folks who sponsor the Linux Action Show. And GoDaddy's got a couple of deals for folks, because with the holidays coming up, you need to save money when you're getting your .coms or whatever it might be. First up, let's talk about your .com. If you want to get something, say, HartleyFamilyHolidays.com.
Yeah.
You know,
Memories and such, sure.
Yeah, things like that.
Pictures.
But you know what? Come on, let's be honest. You got to save money because times are tough. So we can get you that .com for $7.99 if you use our code 599Linux when you check out at GoDaddy.com. All right, but maybe you've got all the .coms you could possibly want. I don't know how that'd be possible because I always think of new ones.
You always got to have more.
But maybe you already have a bunch and you want to do a renewal, or you want to get some hosting, or you got to get some, maybe you want to do the privacy stuff, whatever it might be, and you want to just take some money off. I always mention renewals because I've personally saved a ton of money doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Use our code GO20OFF6. When you use GO20OFF6, you save 20% on your entire order at GoDaddy.com. And you know, when Danica texts me, she always forgets the code, and she only watches the show about every other week, so she sometimes misses it. So I just have like a quick little, go, do this, Danica, do that. And
right.
Every time, man. She's a real supporter of the Linux Action Show.
That's awesome.
And thank you to everyone out there who supports the Linux Action Show by using our codes GO20OFF6 for 20% off your entire order, or $5.99 to get your .com. $5. And you get to use the code. You get to use Linux in the code.
Gotta love that, right?
$5.99 Linux. So thank you to GoDaddy. All right, Matt. Now I have a very nerdy Android app pick. Okay. And it's a free one. Last week I had to pay one.
I like free.
And so we're back to free now, and it is called CalDev Sync Free Beta. Kind of a catchy name, right? Yeah. You like that? And so are you familiar with CalDev is? It's
vaguely. I know that it has to do with calendar syncing.
Yeah, it's the calendar DAV protocol, and it allows you to, say, connect any calendar client that supports CalDev. Thunderbird has it, Outlook has it.
And a lot of that stuff was, it's almost like a kind of a back end to a lot of the local clients, I believe. Yeah.
And Google not only will Google Calendar connect to CalDev, but Google Calendar will also export via CalDev. So now you could use this, although if you're on Android, you might just use the built-in sync services. But what this lets you do is get native calendar syncing to any CalDev source that you want. So if you've got a corporate CalDev server like Exchange or Zimbra, or if you have your own local one, like say via OwnCloud, which we'll talk about in the server segment, you can use CalDev Sync here to connect to that and synchronize all of your calendar entries on your device. Now, back them up first before you do something like this, because you never know. This could go haywire. Sure. What I like about this, though, is not only does it have some good recommendations and reviews, but the guy's planning that once he hits 1.0 to open source it. So I think it's got a good future ahead of it, too. I know this isn't going to be widely applicable, but to anybody that has their own CalDev, or you know what else you could do is if you are an Android switcher, if you've just switched from iPhone to Android, and you still have a lot of your stuff in iCloud, you can move it. You can export it via CalDev, bring it onto your Android device via CalDev, and then sync it to your Google Calendar, and it'll actually be the intermediary between the two.
I like that.
Yeah. So CalDev Sync Free Beta, and CardDAV. Oh, shoot. I meant to put the CalDAV one there. Well, I'll link to this is CardDAV. I was going to include this in. I got them mixed up.
Oh, okay.
So I'll link to CalDAV in the show notes. This is CardDAV for your contacts. This does the same exact thing for contacts. Only back them up first. Sweet. Okay. So I'll have links to both of them in the show notes.
Allows you to liberate that
because they're gonna tune into they're gonna tie in with the OwnCloud segment or the OwnCloud talking. So both of these will sync with the software we're going to talk about in the home server segment. Cool. So check out CardDAV and CalDAV, and they're both free. All right, Matt.
Sweet.
Now, I have got a really great desktop Linux pick that fits a software genre that we've never covered on the show before.
Oh, yeah?
And that is a Twitter client. I don't think we've ever made a Twitter pick.
Actually, I don't think we have.
And I think because when the show started, there was no Twitter.
True.
And then this show went through the period where people who were technical hated Twitter, and it was like not cool to be on Twitter. And not that it's still cool,
but they're all a bunch of Friendster lovers, or what?
I don't know, Identica. But actually,
Identica.
This is an Identica client too, so this covers both bases.
Okay.
And it's called Hot Tot, and it's actually you can get a GTK or Qt version of it. Now this is the GTK version here, and this is a very, very nice Twitter and Identica client. One of the things I like about it a lot is it does threaded conversations. So in your @ replies, you can actually follow the conversation, which is nice. You can tag people with certain colors so they always kind of stand out in your feed. It has extension plugins, and it ships with a built-in extension called the Content Firewall, but there's a bunch of other ones you can add. It does inline image previews. It also do inline video previews. It's all WebKit-based, so it has a GTK wrapper, but it's WebKit-based. Very good, smooth transitions and animations. It has a menu integrator. It ties in with either Gnome, Cinnamon, or Unity right down in the system tray. So it's very nice for that. Of course, it's free, and it's in most distros package managers. I just haven't ever checked it out. And it has it'll also do, like, if somebody tags their tweet with location. It'll also display animated GIFs, a little a la Google+.
That I like, yeah.
And if somebody, I don't see anybody doing it here, but if somebody were to tag a tweet with a location, it'll also give you a Google Map integration. It'll show their location.
So it just plops the map right in.
Yeah,
Okay.
and of course this is free. I've been using this for the last couple of days. It's way better than Gwibber.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's actually better than any other Twitter client that I've actually used for a long time. I've kind of gone back to the web. It's very good for a WebKit-based thing, and it's got a bunch of really good search functionality. And I absolutely recommend it. It's called Hot HOTOT. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. You guys can check that out. So if you use Identica or Twitter, it's a good one. And I know a lot of our audience are not Twitter users. Yeah. And that's fine. It's good for even just like searching for current events and breaking news things. So you might just check it out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, here locally, a lot like Washington State Patrol, things like that. A lot of the Amber Alerts and things like that come through Twitter. So it's nice to be in tune with that.
Yes, very well, very well.
Yes.
All right. Now, how about a distro pick that I think will tingle the imagination of few of our audience members out there?
Sounds good.
It got my attention because the name is called Synarch. And if you're watching the video version here, I'll give you a little demonstration of it. And it, as you probably grokked from the name, it's an Arch distribution. It was actually started originally. Oh, you know what? I'll pull up their project page. It started originally as called the Arch Live CD. And when the project kind of thought, we'll just make a really easy to use Arch Live environment. And that's kind of how we'll make our name. But that, that for whatever reason, I didn't really read why, didn't quite work out for them. But they've taken it and they've grown it into a rolling release Arch-based distribution. Here's what they say on their About page, okay? Synarch, the purpose of Synarch is to produce a modern, elegant, and powerful operating system based on one of the best Linux distros out there, Arch Linux. Synarch was first conceived as the Arch Live CD, and they've released it now as their first official Synarch release on May 7th, 2012. Synarch is very customizable. It's open source, and it uses the official Arch repos and AUR. And when you download the distro, the ISO is just only the net install, and it pulls down the absolute latest and greatest packages. Like I'm running kernel 3.6.7. something. Absolutely, even Cinnamon was just released, and I'm running like an update was just released, and I'm running it. It's really good. It comes with your traditional kind of Mint menu that the Mint folks have created, and this is a really cool way to try out Cinnamon with Arch on top, and since it's full Arch underneath, you kind of get best of both worlds. And they even have some system settings stuff where you can go in here and configure things. And I've moved my menu around a little bit to the bottom because that's kind of like where I prefer it. But what really struck me is their defaults, Matt. If their default instant messenger is Pigeon, right?
Yeah.
Their default web browser, absolutely fresh Chromium. Their default Twitter client was Hot. That's actually how I came across it. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
They include. It's called Pacman XG4, and it is a GUI Pacman client. And this is really
slick.
Nice. Yeah.
This is really slick.
This is where I was kind of, we've seen some of this stuff before, but I always got errors and stuff. Now this here,
exactly.
I went into this task screen, right? You've got synchronized mirrors. It's just right there. Update systems, update packages from R. I did that this morning before the show, before Matt and I went on air. I downloaded some of the latest packages from the Arch repos.
What I saw. Yeah.
Find the latest, fastest mirrors. Okay. And then of course it also has a package manager where you can do some searching, the Arch repos. And nice. I think it's a little clunky, but if
it works,
I don't know if you're looking for something, you can find it pretty. Like there's Empathy, and I could just right click install it, and it would go out and get it from the Arch repo
pretty easily. Yeah.
And like some of the other, like I think maybe it was Shakaraka or one of the other ones. It also pulls down the latest Arch news right here in the main deal. So like you can.
That's helpful. Yeah.
So if there's like, for example, the transition to systemd. Now, because I did the net install, not only is this like the absolute freshest packages, like super fresh, it's also using systemd.
Oh, okay.
So it's already made the transition to systemd. Nice. So if you want to try Arch and you want to try Cinnamon and you want to try systemd and you want something really easy to use, they're working on a GUI installer, but it's a live CD. It boots up into a live environment, brings you right to Cinnamon, and then they have a really easy to use, the Arch installer.
Next.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Synarch, it's called, and
seems like it's pretty responsive, quite fast.
It's and I'm running kind of on a slower machine under emulation here. Back in my office, I was really impressed. And Cinnamon, also, by the way, Cinnamon is really coming along. I mean,
it used to be a lot clunkier, but it seems like they've really matured.
They still got things like restart Cinnamon in here if things go wonky. But I mean,
I like that feature. It means you're not.
Yes, I do too. I do too, and it's extensible. And look, the settings right here, I can get immediate access to like all settings, and it fires the stuff up. I mean, I think
and such. Yeah.
I think this is I think Cinnamon is a sleeper hit that I need to pay more attention to.
I think so.
Also, Gnome folks, well, you're going to get a treat today because we're going to talk a ton about Gnome 3.8 in the news segment. But
Nice. Okay.
if you've been looking for something, go check out CineArch. I came away really freaking impressed. And
It looks like a really great way to get your Arch on if you want to try something maybe a little different, a derivative, if you will.
And it's at cinearch.com. They're kind of a new project. They're just getting underway, and they also take donations and funding. So if you love Arch and you love the idea of making Arch more accessible, and you love Cinnamon, this is probably right up your alley. They're also using the same login window manager the same login manager that Ubuntu uses, but I'm drawing.
Really?
Light DM.
That's interesting.
Light DM. So there you go.
Cool.
All right, man.
Cool.
So check out all the links to our picks, and also just a big shout out to our linuxactionshow.subreddit.com. That's a great place to follow late-breaking stories throughout the week, submit stories, vote on stories, leave comments. Tons of great conversations over there at linuxactionshow.reddit.com. All right, Matt, let's do the news.
So, what's new in the news?
All right, Matt. Well, we'll start out this week with what was probably the biggest Linux news story because it percolated up into mainstream headlines, and that's always fun.
Yeah.
I saw this briefly on Tech Meme, and of course, it made it over to TechCrunch. Here's the headline. I love it. Canonical's Mark Shuttleworth tires of critics, moves key Ubuntu development out of public eye.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. And did Reddit and the IRC room just light up on fire with this one? And I got to tell you, Matt, my first impressions when I read Mark Shuttleworth's first blog post is I walked away and I said to myself, what is he saying? Is he saying they're going to no longer do betas? And is he saying that they're just going to, like, I don't know if you remember, but way back in the day, way before there was ever an OpenSUSE, when it was still SUSE Linux, they would do this. They had a closed beta process, and then they would release at the end of their cycle a boxed copy that you could buy. Do you remember this?
I do remember that. Actually, I remember the stores that carried the boxed copy. Actually.
Yeah, sure, right,
yeah.
right. So I was wondering, like, are they taking that route?
I'm beginning to think so. I wish that someone in this space would take more of a forward-thinking approach to actually vet these ideas and opinions amongst other people before they get launched into the public like this, because a lot of this stuff gets blown out of proportion.
Well, okay. So what you're really saying, without saying it, is what
be nice, but
what we are having to really just be completely honest about is Mark Shuttleworth is a bad communicator.
Yeah, I was trying to beat around the bush on that. Yeah,
I mean, just look at look at the way all of the Unity Lens, Shopee Lens stuff was done. Right.
Right.
Here's the pattern that has now been firmly established in the canonical public communications. Step 1: Mark Shuttleworth makes a blog post that nobody understands.
Yeah.
Step 2, Mark Shuttleworth makes a blog post where he tries to explain what he just said, and it doesn't seem like he understands why people are confused. And often, it sounds like he's saying something different than what he said in the first post. And then step 3 is John O'Bacon makes a post trying to smooth everything over and explaining what's really going on.
And props to him for his efforts. But the bigger issue here is that Ubuntu has a massive communication problem with their users. They do. And that's the bigger issue that I see is they tend to, and I've seen other companies do this, to where they jump first and then wait for reaction versus actually having a dialogue.
There seems to be such a severe trust issue between the community and Ubuntu.
It's beginning to develop. Yeah.
And Jesus, if you look at the comments on Mark Shuttleworth's blog, I mean, people are tearing this guy up. And if it wasn't for this guy, there wouldn't be an Ubuntu Linux to begin with. And it's like, guys, you got to keep some of the stuff in perspective. Now, here's what I think is really going on, and it's hard to parse. I mean, I've read his blog several times, and then all of his follow-up comments that I could get my hands on, and it wasn't until a few others that are associated with the Ubuntu project actually made some really good clarifications on their blogs that I really started to kind of understand what we're dealing with here. So,
but at the same time, when they respond to it, it's this. They come off with this era of, you people are just dumb and you don't understand what we're saying. No, you guys aren't communicating effectively.
Canonical is not realizing. So Mark called it opening up the skunkworks, right? Yeah. So I am gathering that skunkworks is that's a common term for internal secret project development. It comes from American history, I believe. And now, what I think people misunderstood is the way Mark's first blog post comes across is it sounds like they're creating this skunkworks for the first time and bringing stuff in-house.
Right. That's how it appeared to a lot of people. Yeah.
And what it actually is stuff that they were already developing in-house, like the Unity shopping lens and things like that. They're going to bring certain key members of the community in first before those even make the beta cycle. So stuff that they're developing will still hit the betas and alphas, or maybe like later in the release cycle so they can hold a little closer. But
But here's
and it's still going to result in GPL'd code.
But here's where it becomes ineffective. We're going to handpick all the people that are basically going to be yes men to come in and take a look at what we're doing. I think that's a danger. Bring in some critics. Bring in some pissed off people, and then I'll be impressed.
And is this a response to the Unity shopping lens fiasco?
I think it's partially in response. I think it's they're trying to put out. There's like little brush fires going on everywhere, and instead of addressing the brush fires at one fell swoop, they're trying to these little half-hearted attempts to fix a solution that it's just a matter of. Reach out to your community more effectively. Don't dictate what you're going to do all the time. Say, hey, we're considering going this direction. Are you got what's some feedback? And then you can make your ultimate decision. But I don't see a lot of that happening anymore. Instead, it's we're going to do this. Oh, hey, by the way, if you don't like it, there's something wrong with you.
Here's what I wonder.
And I'm tired of that, honestly.
And I know some people feel like the shopping lens thing is beaten to death. But picture that shopping lens in practical use at a corporate enterprise, right?
Yeah.
So, like we know Ubuntu exists because Google already feels like Ubuntu makes things that in their distro that don't work for them. But picture like that shopping lens in schools, picture that shopping lens in libraries, right? I got to figure there may be even some big customers that have knocked on Canonical's door and said, what are you guys doing? We don't like this. And I wonder, Mark's official role is, lifelong benevolent dictator of the Ubuntu project, right? What if some of this stuff was sort of like Mark playing a Steve Jobs role saying, we're going to do this? Because if you look at Mark's justification for the Unity shopping lens, his first sentence is, of course it makes perfect sense we're including Amazon results in the dash because the dash should search everything. And if you follow that rationale down, that rationale is, well, if the dash is going to search everything, let's start where it's monetizable so we can fund future dash development, and we'll start with something we monetize, and then we just build all this stuff around it. And so maybe Mark was key in ramming this thing through. And then there's this massive backlash, and in order to sort of appease everybody and keep everybody happy and keep his benevolent dictator role, he says, you know what I'm going to do? I still want to be visionary, and I still want to push these things through, but what we'll do is we'll identify people that I trust, and we'll bring them in to review what I'm thinking. And then they'll give me input, and we'll structure it that way, and then once everybody kind of buys off on it, then it'll go into beta cycle.
Yeah, it's like Mr. Burns bringing in Smithers to get advice. It doesn't work. This whole thing is just, and I have no problem with the lens issues per se. That's fine. It's their business. It's their distro. They do what they need to do, and I support that. That's fine. What I don't support is the way they're handling the public, the way they're handling their community. And this is just a small smidgen of a piece of a bigger issue that's getting worse. And I watched this happen with another distribution, and it used to be known as Lenspire. And I watched this happen right as they released FreeSpire, and I watched this whole set of scenarios to where they begin, well, this is good enough. Well, we're fixing it. Why aren't you guys getting this? There's no real communication there. They're not addressing core issues of community, really. They're really not. And so that I've seen this before. The writing's on the wall. I'm not saying this is going to
What's
kill
so
Ubuntu,
funny? What's so funny is when Ubuntu was brand new, there was three things that were really made it successful. Number one, it was synced with new GNOME releases. So if you wanted fresh GNOME, four things. You wanted fresh GNOME, you could get it. Number two, it was Debian based. Okay. The number three thing, which I think is incredibly important, is the unofficial Ubuntu forums. The Ubuntu forums started as an unofficial branch off, and that community grew so strong that it made Ubuntu have a third and fourth feature of the community. And it still is, the PPAs that are available and the community around it are, honest to God, a feature of that desktop because, you get software availability, and that is fantastic. But you got to figure if they continue to poison the well, that could start to dwindle.
Well, what they fail to realize is that the features of Ubuntu are, as you said, the community, and it's also the fact that it has the cutting edge stuff. It has the various PPAs and various software choices and things like that. But it's the base people like. Most people are looking to execute applications. They're not necessarily all that worried about how a desktop environment is. Most people want it light. Some people like Unity, whatever. But that stuff's interchangeable. I don't know.
I think if Canonical can solve these kind of communication challenges. What they're working on, we've had some great conversations in the subreddit this week, but Canonical is uniquely positioned to take advantage of disinterested, high-level users moving away from the Mac and Windows platforms, especially the Windows platform.
Sure.
And you know, people are talking about, oh, well, the problem with Apple is Apple has the iPhone and they have the Mac desktop and they have iTunes and it's this iCloud system and it's all interconnected and it all syncs up. And the problem with Windows is if you want to, they're promising this unified interface across all these devices. You know, Canonical doesn't have anything like that. Well, that's actually their strength. I mean, yes, they do have Ubuntu One. But what they're doing is they're building on top of the services they need to support any device you want, right? I mean, in Unity and Dash, they're integrating in Google Docs, and they're going to pull in Google Calendar, and they're integrating in with all of those different services. So whatever device you want, as long as it syncs with those services, you can use the Ubuntu desktop. That, combined with the Steam support, you know, Valve shipping games, and some honest-to-God, you know, direction and vision, they do have some serious potential.
That's true. Well, and I would even go as far as to say I think Ubuntu One will rival anything anyone else has as it develops. I think that we're beginning to see everything sync with it. And I think that's good. I think that's a great way to monetize. I think that's a great way to grow. And I think that's a great focus. So that I think is awesome. I have no problem with that at all. And I would even say now, if they simply, once again, communicated more effectively, would be able to make this even better with Ubuntu.
It's surprising how bad the headlines are. Before we wrap up on this topic, I just want to cover a couple of the headlines. So one headline was, key parts of Ubuntu 13.04 will be developed in secret to escape critics' ire. And then another headline was, Ubuntu moves some Linux development inside. Of course, but there's been some other ones that have developed since this post, but I thought TechCrunch's Mark Shuttleworth tires of critics. But honestly, that Mark Shuttleworth tires of critics and moves key development in-house, that was how I would have summed it up after I read Mark's blog post too. So,
I mean, and is correct or incorrect or whatever, it was at least communicated in a way that the reader can understand it.
And so maybe we should step back and recognize, though, how, while, yes, we have qualms with how, and I mean, I don't want to harsh on the guy. It's not just what he communicates, it's how he communicates. Like, I can't, for example, he made the announcement of what 13.04 is going to be announced. So many people misunderstood what he said that he had to make a follow-up post to clarify. And even though he wrote like 2 or 3 paragraphs, nobody could parse what he was saying. It's cute and it's eclectic, but it's not effective.
Right.
So that's got to be addressed. But otherwise, I mean, having a funder that's as passionate about the project as he is, that has a vision, and honestly, his willingness to stand up to critics and push through in some areas where it has proven to be more beneficiary to the project are respectable and commendable.
Yeah. No, I have no problem with the strides that they've made. I think that's great, but I do think they need to actually have a little more filtering going on there before some of this stuff goes forward. Right. And I say this as myself. Sometimes I write something that is so misunderstood, and they grab onto one little piece of it and they just run with it. Matt said this negative thing about this, or Matt said this positive thing about that. So I understand where Mark's coming from on that. I do. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that when I do it myself, I got to own up to it. I screwed up. I didn't write it in an effective way that people are understanding it, so I have to address that. And I got to deal with the consequences. And being butthurt over it isn't fixing anything.
There is a little butthurt coming across.
Oh, there's incredible butthurt. And I've been trolled for years.
Yeah.
And you get over it.
Yeah.
Don't get all butthurt about it. I mean, you're in the public eye. Just get over it. You know.
Yeah, it's hard. When you work really hard, it's hard to sometimes.
But you gotta let go. If you enjoy what you're doing, who cares? You know, if you really feel good about it and you can justify, you know, go with it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But whatever. You know, he needs to loosen up a little bit.
All right. Well, let's talk about people who are moving ahead despite maybe some of the butthurtness, and that's the Gnome project. So I'm not going to cover a lot because I didn't get a chance to read through all of this, but there's a couple of things that stood out to me, and I want to say thank you to Bernard in our subreddit who. And by the way, people don't know this because I don't mention it very often, but if I notice that you're a really great contributor, I'll often send somebody a little Reddit gold as a thank you. And if I haven't got you and you think you're an awesome contributor, you know, I'm sorry, I'll get around. I'm trying to get around to everybody I notice who contributes on a regular basis. So I really do appreciate that.
That's cool.
So Gnome 3.8, a couple of things that they're working on feature-wise. And I like this first one because it ties in so perfect with our segment today. Integrated own cloud support. And they're going to do syncing with own cloud, file syncing, contact syncing, all that kind of stuff. Now this one, we've talked about RAID support into the Gnome disk. This one's really interesting, Matt. App Store sandboxing.
And this is for Gnome. Okay, so Gnome 3.8 is going to have some pretty smooth stuff. Yeah.
So I don't know if they're talking about App Store sandboxing for the Gnome OS or for the Gnome desktop, but okay, so
I would assume Gnome OS, right? I mean,
what do you think about this? What do you think about a Linux desktop shipping with app sandboxing? Now, they're actually very early in stages. Like they're trying to even define what an application is, and how to quantify that and how to contain it. But I think this is
I like the idea of sandboxing in software. I mean, as long as it's not limiting the user and it's actually protecting them in a way that they fully understand, I think that sounds very cool.
They have an interesting philosophy. They say they're taking the philosophy of not doubting the user, doubting the application. So they're trying to protect individual applications from each other.
Okay.
And not so much removing control from the user, it appears. So
almost like more of a BSD approach of compartmentalization.
Jails or whatnot. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. Another thing they're talking about doing, and this could have big repercussions for the GNOME project, is they're thinking about requiring systemd for future versions of GNOME.
Oh, wow.
It's starting because the way they want to control the power settings, little power options in GNOME, and communicate with the power subsystem would be much more straightforward if they could do it through systemd. Now, this change would not only take Ubuntu off for GNOME, because Ubuntu uses Upstart, but also BSDs. There's no systemd for BSD. And of course, one of the very first follow-ups to this mailing list thread is from the I believe it's the OpenB maintainer. Does he say in here? He's a BSD maintainer, and he mentions that this would pretty much leave them out in the cold. And what's interesting is OpenBSD is their response is well, I think we could get that figured out. It's just literally.
So rather than he's asking a definitive question, rather than getting a definitive answer,
the response is, I think there's a good chance GNOME running on BSD, thanks to people like you, who can keep it working. So I don't know exactly what that means, but
although that does summarize BSD versus Linux folks to a degree too.
So then some GNOME developers kind of took this and sort of spun this and said, this is really showing how we are once again diverging even further from the Ubuntu project. And
which is fine. That's fine. But I think that the BSD person brings up a very valid point that is yet to really get a definitive answer. I think that's a problem.
Could you imagine though if Ubuntu had, say like they went crazy and said we're going in all GNOME 3, right? And they didn't do Unity, but for some reason they stuck with Upstart. And then all of a sudden, like they had to make this decision. You could kind of see why they want control over their own desktop, right? So that way another project doesn't make them have to fundamentally change their distribution.
And I never had a problem with that. I think that's a valid thing, and it's a way of protecting yourself, and I think that's perfect.
And on the flip side, I can kind of see why the GNOME project wants to create GNOME OS now.
Yeah.
Because they want to do things that maybe some distros don't want to do.
True. Kind of taking the bull by the horns and taking some risks.
To pull off legitimate app sandboxing, that's going to be tricky on an open Linux desktop. So I've got a lot of information about the where they're at with the app sandboxing process.
It's a dialogue to follow, I think, at the very least. Yeah.
It's just starting right now. So you can. And part of the problem is a lot of the initial conversation happened in MeetSpace, and now they've all come back from their conference, and now they're kind of blogging about it. Okay. So we're kind of coming in midstream to this conversation, so it's taking a little bit to get running. But I think if you're a GNOME user, and I know a lot of you out there are, this is probably one that's worth following.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Cool. Well, while we got GNOME on the brain, why don't we shift gears and by the way, links in the show notes to also more information about GNOME Disk RAID support. Revisiting privacy settings, notification filtering feature enhancements, and improvements to Epiphany in 3.8, all linked in the show notes.
Well, props to them for getting a lot of good work in. I think that's cool.
Yeah, right? And just pushing ahead and adding good features and maybe some more controversial features.
Nice.
We'll see.
It's good to see.
All right, Matt. Well, why don't we talk a little KDE camp here? So one thing we haven't really gotten an update on is Plasma Active for a while.
Yeah, what happened with Plasma Active?
Now, for those of you folks who might not remember, Plasma Active is sort of taking all of the KDE and Qt underpinnings from the KDE desktop and leveraging things like QMXL and all of that stuff to build a touch-based interface that is, for things like the hopefully the soon-to-arrive Vivaldi project, but we'll see about that. So they've just released Plasma Active 3, and they've gotten some really interesting features they've brought into this. So they're refining their activities functionality, which is that sort of contextually aware environment that the tablet will set up for you, and it takes cues from your different information, and you can tell it implicitly what you want it to do. So they've gotten that even better. One of the things, though, that they've improved a lot is they've taken the file manager, and they don't have a traditional file manager because they don't really expose the file system unless you really dig.
Makes sense.
But they're considering the file system on the tablet to be an implementation detail. Sort of like the way the kernel just loads device drivers and stuff. And they say, yeah, of course, every device needs it, but the person using the device shouldn't really have to care about the file system. Instead, files focuses on meaning and content. On starting with files, you can select what you want to view, such as documents, images, and music. And files lets you browse information using a timeline or tags. You can include your own tags or automatically make tags with simple touch interface, as well as by activity. So if these types of files are associated with an activity, the file manager will show those. It also has a built-in search that doesn't only search for file names, but also can search the metadata and the content.
Well, that makes sense. If they're trying to aim something at the end user and not just developers, I think this is definitely the way to go.
It's a very interesting
and it looks
design
really intuitive.
Yes, yes.
That's big. That's
yeah, it's looking really good. They've also gotten some noticeable performance gains. A lot of the performance gains, the big ones, came from moving to a new reference operating system. So they've changed the core to Mercore.
Really?
Which is the community continuation of the Migo project that a number of companies are working on. They've actually gotten a good performance.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, I think so. So we have here. This is a demo tablet for you video viewers. You can actually see a little bit of Plasma active. And the performance is improving too.
It seems pretty poppy, or pretty responsive, rather.
Snappy or whatever.
Snappy, poppy, snappy, yeah.
Yeah. And now this is really starting to become a solution that's just waiting for some good hardware to throw it on. And the idea of this desktop is you just take a completely open Linux system, a completely open Linux subsystem running Debian or Fedora or whatever it is, and throw an open desktop on it. You don't have to do this one cohesive OS desktop integrated UI. You can have a legitimate, fully functional Linux system with a usable touch interface. And it's interesting to see, Canonical's taking the Unity approach, one UI to rule them all. So is Gnome.
Yep, Gnome's got
and
theirs.
KDE's saying, well, we're using all the same underpinning technologies. We're taking advantage of a lot of the same applications, but we're rewrapping them or we're redoing the core touch interface.
I got to say, I like KDE's approach better. It just looks more attractive. And, the functionality seems to be there from what I'm seeing in this video demonstration here. I mean, it looks like it's really responsive. There's lots of,
Yeah, and we've got, We've got an interesting time ahead of us as these ARM processors are really starting to get very powerful and quad cores. I mean, you could take this. We could really be. I guess this is kind of what Windows 8 is trying to accomplish, but I
think KDE could do it better.
I think they can too, which is really something.
That's pretty cool. I'm liking it.
So props to Aaron and the Plasma Active team. We've got a link to his blog. You can check it out. They've also spent a good amount of time improving all the small things, such as where the buttons appear, sheet-style dialogues that they use, how applications are listed, animations, and things like that. So
sweet.
Big props to them.
Looking good. Matt. Looking good.
Matt, are you ready to talk a little NVIDIA?
Let's talk some NVIDIA.
Okay. So last week, we talked about this little kerfuffle between the kernel developers and NVIDIA because NVIDIA wants to take advantage of this new DMA-BUF interface that would allow them to do integrated and discrete graphic handoffs and things to switch
better
between.
Experience for the user.
Yeah. So if you've got like a ThinkPad that has a Optimus technology in there for switching between an Intel GPU and NVIDIA GPU, this affects you. So the latest is that things actually really haven't settled very much. And in fact, according to this Phronix article, Alan Cox is pushing pretty hard. NVIDIA isn't looking to steal a bunch of code, says Phronix, and pump it into the binary blob. They're just looking to use this as a unified infrastructure for passing buffers between drivers in a standardized ways. Yeah. Coincidentally, ARM system-on-a-chip vendors with proprietary drivers would also like to leverage this DMA buffer between their binary drivers as well. So it's not just NVIDIA, it's Android manufacturers, tablet manufacturers. They also want to use this interface.
So there's a real push here if we can make this happen.
And you kind of have to think, too, NVIDIA is really trying to do proper Optimus support, like through a legitimate, kernel interface to do this. And especially after Linus, very publicly told them to go F themselves.
And so NVIDIA is now saying, okay, we've gone and done that, and now we're back and we're ready to work with you guys, but you got to actually give us a bone here.
David Arley and other open source graphics drivers also are in support of this change. They say, I'd rather let the users have some hope of a sane architecture instead of having NVIDIA have to replace even more user space code and kernel code with their insane S. So what this open? So he's maybe he makes an Ubuntu driver. I'm not sure which open source driver he works on. But what he's saying is, if Alan Cox blocks NVIDIA for using this DMA buffer interface, then NVIDIA's choices are not to do Optimus support, and I'm sure future things that are like this, right? Because this kind of trend is only going to continue.
Oh yeah.
Or NVIDIA writes its own completely customized interface that has to live in some sort of weird user land space and kernel space.
But there's no way they're going to be motivated enough to go that far. So at some point, someone's got to give, and I don't think it's going to be
And if they do, don't you think it's going to break like with every major kernel update?
Would. So this whole thing is we're dealing with licensing headaches again.
Without this, Michael over at Phronix goes on to say that NVIDIA would be forced to reinvent the wheel and come up with their own infrastructure that might work with other open source DMR drivers, or just abandon Optimus support plans altogether. NVIDIA isn't going to simply open source the driver, and they need a way to share the buffered data with their drivers. In the latest mailing list discussion post, which largely come down to fighting between Alan Cox and David Arley, you can see it here. In fact, it's gone so far to say that they're like, we're moving forward with this because all of the rights owners of this particular thing want to do this. And what
have they really discussed why NVIDIA's so unwilling to do this? Are they concerned about ATI saying, "Oh, that's how they did it," and like running off with their stuff? I don't understand, or AMD rather. But
I don't know. I mean, at this point,
it's being reverse engineered regardless of how it's being licensed. So who cares?
It's got to be A, they don't own it, and B, there might be some competitive stuff, and C, maybe some people that have a lot of sway up top don't want to change it. And see, what you have here is you have people who are just doing their job, software engineers working for NVIDIA, interfacing with these kernel developers. They aren't people that can make policy change, and they probably don't even have a lot of slack to promote policy change.
But you would think that they could check with their higher-ups and say, look, can I bullet point a quick list of very generic reasons why we can't do this?
Right.
That it's not because
Wouldn't
we're being
that be
dicks.
nice?
We can't.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, I don't understand why.
So what observers are sort of pulling out of this entire debacle really is, based on the way that the kernel copying license is written, anything but standard calls to the kernel are considered interacting with kernel code.
Okay.
So if you're not using a standard call, if you're actually interacting at a code level with the kernel, then you are considered interacting with code, and thereby you are impacted by the GPL. So what? So and NVIDIA knows this.
Yeah.
NVIDIA knows this. So what this is all about, check this out. Okay, so here, I'll just break it down. So we all know the kernel is GPL, and the license states that everything that communicates through it, anything but system calls, is considered derivative work. What NVIDIA wants is there's this export _ symbol _ GPL that is part of the kernel. NVIDIA has submitted a patch and wants them to change that to export _ symbol, just to remove the GPL reference. That doesn't solve any particular problem. They're still both under the GPL. It actually makes zero difference. The only way to make the DMA-BUF available for use with proprietary software is either to make it no longer part of the kernel or to make it somehow accessible via system calls. Otherwise, the functionality must be implemented in userland. So what it really is what some people think, and maybe this is the cynical way to look at it, is people think that what NVIDIA was trying to do is by submitting a patch that removed the GPL tag, that they were sort of getting tacit approval from the kernel developers to interface with this buffer.
You think maybe they were kind of testing the waters and seeing how much leeway they could get there?
Because it would open them up to lawsuit.
Yeah.
But if they could take this and say, look, they accepted our patch, they knew what we were doing, we had good intention, they might be able to defer that. They might be able to get out of that. I think that's really what this is about.
I think probably it was. I mean, because as you said, from a functionality point of view, it didn't actually change squat. So yeah, I think they're testing the waters.
The frustrating thing is from a user perspective, I really want this. And you got to figure with companies like Valve and other companies like Good Old Games, they look at the Linux platform and they see this type of back and forth that directly it would affect the way their product functions on that platform, and they see an unwillingness from the core infrastructure team to accommodate them. You got to figure they look at that and go,
well, I tell you exactly where this is going to end up. If I'm NVIDIA, and I'm not saying I'm on NVIDIA's side, I think both sides are equally at fault, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. It takes two to tango. But if I'm NVIDIA as a company and not as a group of individuals, I'm washing my hands of this. If I'm NVIDIA, I'm not gonna bother with it anymore. Yeah. Like, you guys clearly aren't going to want to work with the way we want to work with it, even though we may be wrong. So screw you. What
we're in a good position is gaming is picking up. Intel drivers are working better and better, and so are the ATI open source drivers working better and better. So thankfully, there's some pressure on NVIDIA to stay competitive. Now, and there's also the Linux workstation space, so they make a good chunk of change.
Well, and if Steam is really popular, once it rolls out into Linux, now that could change NVIDIA's tune. They could end up finding a way to make this work. Maybe if there is a license fee issue, for instance, maybe there's a way that end users can pay the fee or whatever.
Well, some sort of a way. Because I would, if there was some way as an end user I could opt to do this, I would enable that in a heartbeat.
I mean, we understand that there's rules and regulations and all that, and we're willing to play that game to a degree, but at the same time, we don't want to get caught up in the politics of it. That's where I think, at least for myself, I get frustrated with it. you know, you know, who
I
wants to
wouldn't
deal
be
with it?
surprised if Nvidia has to move some of this functionality to user land and then has to write some sort of open source.
But we have to gauge how far their motivation is
Intermediary?
to do so yet.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah.
After Steam, probably. Right now, nah, ain't going to happen.
Well, yeah, maybe. You might be right. So,
And, you know, hopefully it happens sooner. So.
all right, Matt, we'll keep
I need
an eye
a
on
little
it.
more volume, it sounds like.
Yeah,
so.
we'll take care of that next.
So, yeah. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. So,
Well, all right. Now, one last little driver thing to follow up on before we jump out of here and go talk about making ultimate servers.
oh, yeah.
Is remember that whole Intel Haswell, we're not going to support Linux
Yes.
debacle?
Yes.
Intel's come out and said now, well, guess what? We screwed up. Daniel Vetter of Intel's Open Source
Wow.
Technology Center sent in a pull request that provides bug fixes for the Intel DRM kernel driver. The main change as part of this pull, which is also for the kernel stable series, is disabling Haswell support by default and hiding it behind the previously talked about kernel module parameter. They go on to say, you know, we didn't get in this soon enough. We want to aim for 3.6 support, but we're not on schedule for that. We're going to now have to aim for 3.8 support at best. It's probably going to be 2013, maybe. They're saying maybe they want to have it out of the box in Ubuntu 13.04 as Intel's shot. I think it's funny they're even tracking Ubuntu releases for these kinds of things for Intel drivers. But
well,
good to see them kind of come out and fess up.
Yeah, I mean, they're actually, and this is an example of, hey, we screwed up. Even if they don't believe they did, they're owning up to a situation and trying to rectify it. Good for them.
And it's so nice to have, you know, a driver vendor that looks at it and says, well, you know what, the Linux kernel is GPL. And that's the facts. We got to work within that sandbox.
Exactly.
That's the rules of the playground here.
Right.
And if we want to participate, that's what we got to follow. And it's refreshing.
I think
a few other companies could take the lead, take the hint, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Hey, speaking to you, NVIDIA.
All right, Matt. Well, that's all the news for this week. All right, Matt, let's make our home servers great. And I think there's been a promise out there that you could set up the server at your house and have it take care of all these things for you and make your home network run much better. But when it actually comes to putting the rubber to the road, people kind of get a little lost on how to actually accomplish that.
A lot of stuff going on there.
So let's get some value out of these machines. I think people will really get a lot of everybody. If you already have a home server, you can kind of validate your setup against this. If you've been thinking about it, this will give you a few ideas of what you can try. And so I think you're going to really like it. But before we get rolling, I want to say thank you to System76 for sponsoring this segment of the Linux Action Show. You know, it's funny because we were just talking about Nvidia driver issues and all this kind of stuff. And if that's something that when you're running Linux, you just don't want to have to worry about ever,
exactly.
go with System76. These guys design these systems to run Linux.
Exactly. And they're not looking at just run Linux today. They're talking about running Linux down the road as well, so that you're not having to worry about, oh, hey, look, a bug. They'll address it. Oh, hey, look, a compatibility issue. They've addressed it.
Laptops, desktops, they have a great, if you go over there and click on that big nice
if you value your
have,
free time, this is where to go.
They have a page up that kind of breaks down the Ubuntu operating system and its features. Now, everybody listening to this show knows all this stuff, but if you've got somebody who's new, look what they've done here. They've broken out like some of the key Touchstone apps. Like if you want somebody's like, hey, what's this Linux thing about? Send them this link. This thing has it's like, why doesn't Canonical have a page like this?
Right, exactly. They do a really nice job at kind of clarifying the advantages of using their PCs and the
it really
Ubuntu.
shows you that they get Linux and they get Ubuntu and they just make some great systems. So thank you to System76 for supporting the show. You can find a link to them in the show notes.
And it dual boots with Arch real nice too. So if you want to try some other distributions, the support's there. Works out pretty well.
Nice. All right. So we're going to take some time covering a lot of stuff, but I'm going to keep it kind of high level. And if you hear something and you're like, oh, I'd really like to know more information about that particular app, email us or start a thread in the Linux Action Show subreddit and let us know. And the ones that we hear the most response on will probably spin off into entire reviews in their own episode. So keep that in mind. And also links to all of the software packages I talk about are in the show notes as we go. So if you hear me mention something, you can go find a link there. Now, I want to talk about my approach.
Okay.
I kind of have a unique situation in that I have a lot of media with Jupiter Broadcasting that I deal with. And so I need about 14 terabytes of home storage.
Wow.
And that's probably more than most people have.
Yeah, I'd say so.
For their home setup. And I gotta make a qualification here. I've been like a system admin now for 14, 15 years, and I have certain principles that I have to follow.
Right.
And one of them is if I'm dealing with a data set that's 14 terabytes in size, and initially it was 12, but I knew it'd be immediately growing to 14. I needed something that would grow and
a little
would be
expandability
reliable.
there,
And honestly, there's just nothing on Linux yet that I think is ready. ButterFS is too new.
Yeah, it is quite new.
I mean, I use it as like on my main like root file system, just as like my play machine.
Oh yeah,
I got ButterFS.
Great place to test things out. Sure.
In that Synarch machine I had, I did ButterFS. You know, so I mean, I'm not anti-ButterFS, but when it comes to preserving data, and data sets that large across multiple volumes,
you need something a little more tried and true.
Well, and honestly, you know, on TechSnap, Alan has sold me on ZFS, tried and true. But I'm not a BSD expert.
Sure.
And I'm not willing to do like a ZFS userland module or something like that for Linux. I want absolute native operating system level support for ZFS, right?
No muss, no fuss.
So that's FreeBSD.
Okay.
But I am a Linux user, and I'm not a FreeBSD user, and I wanted to run all my applications in Linux.
So that presented a unique challenge for you. Yeah.
So I decided to do something that I'm not sure a lot of people would do. And what I did, you could accomplish with virtualization, but I decided to go 2 servers. I know it's a little crazy.
Yeah,
I know.
It's piqued my interest. Okay.
So I have a back-end appliance storage server that runs FreeNAS.
Makes sense.
The latest version of FreeNAS, and I bought it. I bought it because I didn't have time. I bought it straight up from iX System. It's called their FreeNAS Mini, and it comes in a shuttle PC case where it has like this the 4-drive bay integrated to the top of it, and then it also has eSATA on the back. So I have additional storage connected via eSATA. Right. So you know it's 8 gigabytes. It's got a Core i5. It's got 12 terabytes of storage in the box, and then I added additional storage to the out. It's got gigabit Ethernet, so it's a really good appliance, right? Low power, quiet. And then in front of that, I have a Ubuntu. Right now it's 12.10, but it will be 12.04 when I'm final. I have an Ubuntu front-end server.
Okay.
And this does an NFS mount back to my FreeNAS ZFS storage. So all of the applications and everything on Ubuntu, they all interact over that NFS mount, and they're none the wiser.
So it's basically the front-facing portion of your setup.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm taking advantage of ZFS back-end storage, and then I'm using Linux front-end application services too.
Interesting. Interesting.
You could do this all on a single Linux box.
Yeah.
You could do this on one virtual server. And
this is just the option that worked best for your needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And the virtualization system that I think we should review on this show, if people are interested, so let us know if you are, is Proxmox. Oh God, I've never had to say it out loud. Proxmox.
I'm going to call it Proxmox. Yeah.
It's a bare metal Debian based virtualization system that sits on top of KVM and gives you a web interface to manage KVM. People are raving about it. So I've tried it out and I'm pretty impressed. So I'm going to say, for a good server side virtualization suite, and if you want to use KVM, this might be a great way to do it.
Okay.
You can run Windows VMs, you can run Linux VMs. It's Proxmox VE.
Looks pretty slick.
Link and videos to that in the show notes. So if you didn't want to do 2 servers, you might go that route. And if you'd like a review of that, let us know, guys. All right.
Okay.
So let's start with the networking essentials for my house.
All right. Let's get on
the things that I do. So we're kind of like at the layer level. We'll start at the very basic and we'll work our way up.
All right.
So the very basic thing that I want in my house is local DNS resolution.
Can understand that.
It makes things a little faster, but I have 14 systems or so in my, maybe more than that, and I want to refer to them all by name.
Yeah, you don't want to have to deal with the other stuff. That completely makes sense to me.
So the package that I recommend you use, because it does a lot of things, is DNS Mask, and you can find it in your repo, of course. It's for anything out there. It's a DNS server. It can also be a DHCP server, and it can integrate with Pixie, so you can actually do Pixie booting with this thing. So if you have some systems that do network booting, they can get the IP, they can get all of their network information all from this one service, and it does caching. I mean, it's a very, very good system. Very robust. And we've talked a little bit on TechSnap before, so if you want some information, you can catch that. So I start with that.
Okay, that's your starting point.
Then to manage it, I actually kind of like to have a GUI, because if I'm at a client or something like that, I kind of, I want to just...
Sometimes it's a little faster.
I like having windows. Like I want to have multiple terminal windows open.
Especially if you've done something, you're like, now, did I do that yet? You can revert back.
And I like to be able to like start a remote session and disconnect, and it's easy to do it. Now the app that I'm using, now it doesn't work with a composite of desktops. You need to be using like XFC or LXD on your server.
No compositing. Gotcha.
If you're running a GUI on your server, and I understand a lot of you don't, and you wouldn't, but I have the resources, and I also kind of want it as like a remote system when I'm out and about. So I kind of double duty that. And I'm using, check this out, Matt, XRDP. XRDP is a re-implementation of the RDP server that Windows has, remote desktop.
seriously?
So
No
you can
kidding.
actually use the standard Windows remote desktop client to remotely log into your Linux box. And I think what it's doing is it's just doing VNC in the background.
I think so, but still, it's a nice little package to work with there.
Yeah, and so you can. I mean, every Windows box has an RDP client. Every Linux distro has an RDP client. There's tons of RDP clients for tablets.
Yeah.
It's really cool, and you could use standard VNC or even something like FreeNX.
Could.
But I just love the universal. Everything works with this, and
It's already wired for this need.
Yeah.
For those that choose to go this route.
yeah. So that's called XRDP, and that's how I remote into my
Nice.
server. All right. So let's talk about something I'm doing that I'm sort of in the process of transitioning through.
Okay.
A lot of our house workflow relies on Dropbox running on my server.
Right.
People think of Dropbox, they think of that little icon down in their tray, and they think of it syncing files. But Dropbox for Linux has a completely command line version that you can run on a Linux server that'll keep it running headless and syncing. So I have,
does it really? Oh.
Yeah, it's nice. So that way I don't have to have Dropbox on every machine.
Yeah.
I put it on my file server and I have it do the syncing. And I've also linked to a Python script that allows you to control it. And so I'll talk a little bit more about how I use Dropbox.
Right.
But I use Dropbox primarily in my application settings syncing for my editing my Mac system.
Makes
so the
sense,
Macs, the Macs have like all these different programs you set up for video editing.
And it's nice to be able to kind of make that a uniform.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So I sync that through Dropbox, right? And I sync all of my playlists through Dropbox. I also sync all my torrent and Usenet downloads. So if I download a torrent file or I download a Usenet file, an NZB file, I don't start a client on the machine I'm at. I toss it in my Dropbox folder, and then on my server, I have the corresponding application monitoring the Dropbox folder, and as soon as it shows up, it just starts downloading.
Oh, that's sweet.
And so it's a nice, and that's
a good approach.
Putting it in a folder. The nice thing about that is it works from your smartphone because there's Dropbox for the smartphone.
Yeah.
My wife can use it because she just puts it in a folder, and I have Dropbox on her computer, and just done.
Very friendly.
So I like that a lot. Now, that said, I kind of have some issues with Dropbox, and I kind of have issues with Dropbox on Linux.
Okay.
I think a lot of people know that have watched this show that I've been a follower of the OwnCloud project for a
Big
while.
fan of the OwnCloud.
And the nice thing about OwnCloud, right, is it replaces a lot of online cloud functionality like calendar.
Well, it puts you in charge of it.
Exactly.
I mean, you're taking liberation of your data, literally.
You're keeping it, right?
Yeah,
You're owning
yours.
it, and nobody's scanning it or anything like
No
that.
terms of service, none of that.
Well, OwnCloud on October 11th just pushed out the 4.5 release. And what made me really kind of think like I can start transitioning now over to OwnCloud is one of their major features is mounting of external storage. So administrators of the OwnCloud system can now mount cloud storage such as Dropbox, Google Docs, Swift, S3 into OwnCloud. So let me now this is I just set this up. I haven't moved over yet.
Right,
I'm in
but
the
we got a
process.
basic experience here.
So here's my OwnCloud install on my home server, and I just like I said, I'm just getting this
brand new.
And my Dropbox is humongous, and I've noticed that if I try to browse Dropbox in here, it gets really really slow.
Okay.
But so you see right here in my root, I have a few folders. I have Client Sync.
Yeah.
I have Dropbizzle. That's my Dropbox. And I have Google Drive, and then I have Instant Upload. Okay.
Nice.
So
nice.
Let's go through these one by one. So Client Sync, you might have guessed, is now OwnCloud has syncing clients for Mac, Windows, and Linux.
Sure.
And the Linux client, let me see if I can find a screenshot for you. The Linux client is great. You just set it up, you point it at a directory, they're just getting started, but they've got packages. They're using the OpenSUSE build service to create packages for Fedora.
Oh, that's cool.
OpenSUSE, everything out there, right?
Yeah.
And so you can install the sync client on a Linux box or a Windows box, whatever you got. It will then sync all of the files in that folder up to OwnCloud, all of Dropbox, all of Ubuntu One. And so there you can see here I've synced music, pictures, and text, right? And then OwnCloud is aware of all of the pictures in these folders. So when I go to my pictures category, it'll then display the pictures that are across all of these different repositories.
Oh, see, that's fantastic because a lot of times maybe I've got some stuff in Ubuntu One, maybe I've got some stuff in Dropbox.
Exactly.
And being able to say, I just want pictures. I don't care what
brings it all together.
Bam,
brings it all together. It's very nice. It's the one integration. Now, see, the problem is I can't really show you because since I added my Dropbox, this thing isn't running very good. So I might pull that out.
Sure.
But so the other folders I have, one of the other folders I had in there was Instant Upload.
Okay.
There's an OwnCloud client for Android. That you can enable so that when you take pictures, they automatically upload in the background to your own cloud server, right?
How cool would this be like for, not just from a business perspective, but for parents? It's like, rather than emailing some big, huge photo that they might want to print because sending it uncompressed is not going to happen via email. What a great way to do that. Maybe they're not into Facebook. This is a great option.
And cool. The way it's going to work when we're done is like if I take a picture, like say I take the kids out and we're like lately we've been going to pumpkin patches and we're at a pumpkin patch and say Angie's at home, right?
Yeah.
I can take a picture and it just shows up in the folder, and then she can go look at the pictures as I'm taking them.
And like literally, I like this one, and maybe I don't like that one.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
It is very nice, and tying in with Google Docs is nice too because I can pull down docs and I can download them through OwnCloud.
Oh, man, I love this. So, I'm so installing this.
I'm experimenting with transitioning from Dropbox to OwnCloud because of the additional functionality, and like I mentioned at the top of the show, OwnCloud also has things like calendar support. So if you can sync your desktop calendar clients and your Android calendar clients with OwnCloud, and it has contact syncing.
So I mean, that really opens up so you can just take responsibility instead of depending on Google or Microsoft or any of these other companies. You can actually take responsibility for your data, such as calendar and contacts as well, and store them on what you choose to store them on. That's nice.
And you can still use those, so they're available, and pull it all down here locally. So OwnCloud 4.5, I'd say the Dropbox stuff, if you have a really big Dropbox, I'm talking like I got like a 70 gigabyte Dropbox. If you got a really big Dropbox, it might be more than it can handle. Right. But you can go in there and revoke access to Dropbox, and that'd probably
and couldn't you do selected folders, I would imagine?
Maybe.
Because I would think so.
I just linked it.
Because if you can do selected folders, then that takes away some of that overhead.
A couple other new features in OwnCloud that made me try this out is file versioning. So now it'll keep track of multi-versions. You can revert back.
Nice.
You can now do more granular shares. So if you're kind of working with a group of people, you can set permissions on different stuff.
That's sweet. Oh, man.
Yeah. I mean, OwnCloud's coming along, and they're just revving like crazy.
That's just crazy opportunity there.
And like one of the things we mentioned, Gnome 3.8, right? Gnome 3.8 is integrating, or they plan to integrate OwnCloud syncing functionality into the Gnome desktop in the future. Ooh, so if you're a Gnome user, there's more incentive there too. Right. That's going to be really cool. And talk about two great things going together there.
I think that's just slick. I mean, it's enough to motivate me to want to check this out further and actually experiment and see how it meets my needs. And maybe I can offer this to others.
It's crazy easy to set up. Everything that I'm talking about today, at least for 12.10, I hope they're in the 12.04 repos, is in the repo. So you can just apt-get OwnCloud. Although 4.5 is not in the repo. But it's a real easy download. It's super easy. Yeah, all right, cool. Matt.
All right.
Now we got to switch gears. So that's the fundamentals. That's how I move files around.
Nuts and bolts.
That's how I do my DNS. That's how I remotely administer it. Now we got to talk about something. I'm a cord cutter. Okay.
I am too.
But I'm not a big proponent of piracy.
No, of course not.
If a movie's good, I buy it. Like I just got the Avengers on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Or here's what I do more often is if my kids get a movie, I absolutely do not want them managing the DVD because to a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, a DVD is a funny, shiny toy.
Yeah. Hey, look what I can do.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Look what it does when I scratch it against the... Yeah,
right. Sure, they don't know. Yeah.
So, I think it's perfectly morally safe to download a copy of something you've already purchased. Sure. I really don't have any problems with that. Also, we all know the legal uses for torrents and Usenet. We all know there's tons of them. And for Unfilter, they're extremely advantageous for me for finding the most off-the-wall news clips.
Oh, yeah.
If some politician says something.
And there's a lot of Creative Commons stuff, a lot of public domain stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff out there.
So I'm a big Usenet fan. I know the first rule of Usenet is not to talk about it, but I'm breaking the rules a little bit here. Yep. I don't use torrents much unless I'm getting a distro.
Right.
Now, the problem with Usenet is you have to have an index of it to find anything.
Yeah. No,
and some of these indexes are shady and they get cracked down by on the FBI, or their database gets compromised, or they charge you, which is really common.
Yep.
So I wanted a way to take essentially to roll my own Usenet Google search, right? To index Usenet myself, and I'll get into why that's advantageous even more down the road.
To find these great resources and these great Creative Commons things, but to do it in a more fluid way.
There's some sort of like NewSab is one out there. There's some other ones that do that, but the one I've been playing with is called SpotWeb.
Okay.
And it's a little hard to follow because it's in Deutsch. It's written in Deutsch. But it's an open source project. It takes advantage of Apache and MySQL. You can get it running on Windows or Linux. It's also available up on GitHub, so you can just go get it off of Git.
Okay.
And so it's called SpotWeb. And it is the nice thing is if you're using Chrome,
nice interface,
if you're using Chrome, you can just automatically translate it. And the Chrome translator does a pretty good job. So I run it in Chrome. You give it your Usenet login.
Right.
And if you don't have a Usenet login, check it out. Most of them are pay.
Okay.
But the pay ones, have like 1,000-day retention. They do SSL, so your ISP can't monitor the traffic. They support multiple connections.
Good for privacy.
I've used mine is Giga News. I've used them for 4 or 5 years. They allow 50 connections. I can pull down 4 to 5 megabytes a second from them.
Wow.
Megabytes. And I have a link in the show notes if you guys don't have it and you want to check it out and you sign up. I get a month free service.
Oh, yeah,
but anyways, so SpotWeb goes out after I give it my Giga News credentials and it indexes all of Usenet. Now, SpotWeb has already defined some categories for me here. So I can see, like, here's all of the HD files that were just recently posted to Usenet, right? I can see that here's Pulp Fiction if I were to steal that, which I wouldn't.
Oh, of course.
Here's Elephant Stream, the Creative Commons. Here's they break it out into TV series, so they're able to parse out individual TV. So here's Cops season 9 if for some reason you wanted that, or music, compressed, uncompressed music, ebooks, WMVs, software. Here's Linux software, all broken out.
Oh, that's cool.
This one, so they tag it either Mac or they'll tag it Linux.
Oh, that saves you some time. I like it.
Yeah,
yeah, it's cool.
And you can pick something here, and once you pick something, it'll generate what's called an NZB file. And this NZB file is essentially an instructions file that I then pass on via Dropbox. So this downloads it to Dropbox, the NZB file. And then my software picks it up via Dropbox and then starts to automatically download it. And the software that I've chosen to do that is called SAB NZB. And this is a web-based application that is a really fantastic Usenet downloader and manager. It does queued downloads. It'll do multi-part downloads. It'll auto detect if a file's bad and password protected, and it'll save you time. It'll do automatic renaming based on the category. It'll do filing for you.
It just does all the heavy lifting for you. I love that.
It's great, and it ties in and it's so easy to get rolling. So it's called. We've talked about it before on the show, but I just SAB NZBD. You guys got to check out this if you're a Usenet user. It's absolutely fantastic.
Sweet.
Now, if you want to do something that's really easy for end users to use, and you really have to be responsible in how you use this next one, because there's not a, and I don't know what the laws are in the country that you're at, because the people watch this all over the show, but in the U.S. there's not a lot of legal uses for this next one.
Not really, no.
And it's called Couch Potato. Now, Couch Potato is a very elegant interface to essentially creating a wish list of movies that you want to find online. And then it will go out and search and monitor for them. And once they pop up online, it'll automatically create an NZB file for them, and then it'll start your downloader. So, for example, Elephant Stream, not yet on Usenet.
Oh, okay.
But if I in Couch Potato here, if I start looking for Elephant Stream, right? And of course, I have to first you type it in there, and of course, first step is misspell elephants, and second step
that's what autocorrect's for. Right? That's fine. Yeah.
And then it goes out and it'll look for it.
Oh, okay.
And if it doesn't find it right away, it'll keep looking for it. And then once it does, it'll either generate a torrent file or an NZB file. And so you tie that in with Dropbox or OwnCloud.
Really, it does all the heavy. It does all the searching for you. It takes care of the whole thing. You can go and do other things. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. That's cool.
So that's Couch Potato. There's a companion. I'm blanking on the name that does the same thing for music. But again, you guys, you really have to be careful on how you use this.
Yeah, this is to be used responsibly for, like I said, Creative Commons content, things that you can legally get.
Yes.
All that good stuff.
All right. So now that I have got content, so like for example, we got Aladdin. It came out on Blu-ray like a while back, last year. And I decided, we actually want to watch it. Sure. And I think I'm going to grab it.
Sure.
So that way we have it. Now it's on my server. I don't have to rip it or anything like that. Because otherwise I would just make a copy of it. So once you have it on this new fancy Linux server you have, there's a lot of different ways you can get the content. Headphones, by the way. Thank you to Hardware Killer. Headphones is the application that is like Couch Potato for music.
Nice, okay.
So how do you get this content from your server to your TV?
That's a tough one.
There's honestly 100 different ways to do it. There's MediaToom. There's a lot of DLNA servers you can set up on your Linux box that if you have a DLNA compliant streaming box hooked up to your TV, it'll work. Or a lot of TVs now even ship with that.
That's true. Yeah, they do.
I find that to be crap. First of all, I've got way more file formats than most any of these programs support, even the really good ones. And a lot of times I want something that is a little more basic. I don't need all of this.
You don't want XBMC or something like that.
Well,
it's a lot of stuff going on.
What works for me, honestly, what our solution has been is Boxy boxes and a Samba share.
Okay.
And it just lists all of the media.
Yeah.
I got a couple of spots in my house though where I didn't want to drop the $100, $200 for a Boxy box, and I already had a gaming console.
Right.
Like a PS3.
Okay. Right.
So in those circumstances, I use a piece of software called PS3 Media Server. Now, just a forewarning, this requires Java on your system, but that's not too tough to get going. And PS3 Media Server is, and I've included, by the way, links for Ubuntu Debian users. Just copy paste to get it all set up.
Cool.
It is what the name sounds. It's a DLNA streaming server for the PS3 gaming console, but it'll also work for other DLNA compatible devices. And what's great about it is it'll do thumbnail generation of videos. It supports all different types of file formats. Like the PlayStation 3 can't play MKVs.
Right. And that stinks.
PS3 Media Server will take MKV files, do real-time caching and transcoding, and then stream it to the PS3.
Oh, it does it all for you.
In the background.
I
So
like that.
when my wife is looking at a list of kids' movies, she doesn't have to remember, oh yeah, I'm on the PS3.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
It's end user friendly. They can just get it done.
Right.
Bam, bam, bam.
And it's been, I've used it for like 2 years now, on and off on different setups, and it has been rock solid. And I've had some issues with the 360 working with it, but even that actually works.
Oh yeah.
So PS3 Media Server, it's free and it's a good one. There's
The price is right. It sounds like it does all the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah,
Gotta love that.
There's a lot of good ones out there to do this. And I've included a home server ideas thread that has some other ones that are listed. But I really like PS3 Media Server. And if you're a Windows guy, I'll also include a Windows tutorial
there. Cool.
I really like PS3 Media Server. I know people have a lot of different varying opinions on it, but that was one I got like some of the most feedback on.
Right.
I like that. All right.
Cool.
Now that's videos, Matt.
Now we're going to audio.
Let's talk audio.
Audio.
The number one thing that gets sent into the show that we never talk about for applications has got to be subsonic.
Oh, yeah, constantly. And understandably.
And I never really tried it. I never had really tried subsonic, but I decided to give it a go. And I didn't know what to expect. Subsonic is, at a highest level, a really advanced web-based media music library manager.
And as a matter of fact, for Ubuntu One users that listen to their music on their smartphones, this is actually, at least for iOS, and I assume for Android as well, this is actually what they use Subsonic as their base. At least they used to. So it's interesting to see how that functionality compares.
And there's straight up Subsonic apps too.
Oh yeah, and quite frankly, the Subsonic apps blow anything else out of the water in that space, in my opinion.
So here's my Subsonic setup, and I just go over to my server, and it was really simple to set up.
Yeah.
I don't think Subsonic is going to be my everyday media player manager.
Yeah.
But what Subsonic gets me closer to is get my own. This is my own music cloud. This is Google Music for myself, and it makes it one less thing I have to worry about when I'm wiping a box.
Yeah, this is very true. It's already taken care of. Yeah.
The other problem it solves for me, and this is a problem that has just dogged me, is some days I download podcasts on my smartphone. Right. Some days I'm sitting at my desk for a couple hours. I'm like, you know what? I think I'll play this podcast.
You need something that's unifying those
right, because then it's still marked as unread on my smartphone. Exactly. It's annoying, right?
Yep.
Dude, Subsonic works as an awesome podcast manager. So first of all, you can subscribe to podcasts super easy. You just paste the RSS feed in here. Here's what's really cool, though. Here's what's really, really cool. You can create playlists in Subsonic, and then playlists become available via a very simple URL on your server as podcast RSS feeds.
Isn't that sweet? I love that feature.
Any playlist can be, so I can create a playlist of like the week's podcasts or music, and then go into my Android podcast manager and add the feed, and it just shows up and streams it from my Subsonic server.
Bam, bam, bam. No extra media.
And I've now tied in the same, now Subsonic's music is looking at the same spot that OwnCloud is, so they're both referencing the same music, which I think is really kind of slick. The other thing I like is if you have multiple people using this, is you have a chat system integrated, there's sort of a DJ system integrated, and a multiplayer support. It gives you stats if you're a stat junkie. I think Subsonic has a lot to offer. For my day-to-day desktop use, I'm not positive. I'd love to see a honest-to-God, full-fledged desktop music app that could tie in with like the media controls on my desktop.
Right, that wasn't as browser-dependent.
Yeah, because they have like an HTML5 pop-out player.
Yeah, but, it's not really it.
But dude, so Subsonic, I've just started to dabble in. If you guys would like to know more about Subsonic, let us know. We can give it a review. I'm pretty impressed. It's not super user-friendly, but
it's not super user-friendly, but if you're an advanced user, and most likely if you're watching this show, this is for you. You will instantly be able to find your way around and get all the functionality you're looking for from it. It's really cool.
Now, you've tried it.
I've played with it. I've used it on...
You kind of bailed, though.
Well, it just... the thing with streaming audio is that, at least for me, it doesn't always work as well as you think it's going to. It's not going to work as smoothly as a local copy. And that's something I've been frustrated with over time. But other than that, if you can get past the caching issues and things like that.
I've only played with it for like 2 days.
Yeah, like I said, it's what Ubuntu One bases their music app on, and it's not flawless. The idea is that you no longer have to have a central app to sync music with, that you just have it all in one space.
That's what I like the idea of.
But it needs a little work.
I like the idea of maybe mounting my server and on my desktop that I'm always sitting at, throwing Rhythmbox or Banshee in front of that, right?
Right.
Or a Clementine or whatever it might be. And then when I'm at a system that like I've just loaded or I'm just sitting at for a couple of hours, then stream it from Subsonic.
Exactly.
That's kind of going to be my
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's cool, and it's definitely worth checking out. It just wasn't a match for my needs personally. So.
All right, Matt, you ready to get geeky with my last like software app pick for your server? And this one, honestly, it's not the easiest to set up because you have to open up a config file, but the config file syntax is crazy easy, you guys. And this is for folks that want an eye on what's going on with their network. Okay. And this is something, I upload massive media files almost every day. Several of our shows are dependent on good Skype connections to have good, reliable podcasts. So I really need to, I'm streaming 24/7 to jblive.tv. I need to really kind of have an eye on how things are operating, right? And I need to know if I need to reboot some
finger on that pulse.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to do this. I want something that is as minimal. I don't want Nagios. I don't want anything like that. I just want something super simple.
No fuss.
Right? Just set it up and forget it, and then just check it when I have an issue. And really, that's my approach to all this stuff. One of my requirements to a server is, you can use a lot of distros, CentOS, Arch, OpenSUSE, Ubuntu, but just make sure it has a good, deep current package repo, because that keeps future administration to a minimum. And one of the reasons I broke out my server as a front-end box is so I can be a little more experimental there and not worry about the back-end data, right? Well, the app I'm playing with is Smoke Ping. And again, props go to the subreddit to turn me on to this a few weeks. About a month ago, I saw this. I've been running this on and off on different boxes. This is a network latency grapher, and it does it through a series of F pings to different hosts that you define. And it gives you essentially a health snapshot of how your network is doing. And I've gone through here, and I've set up things like I've set up my local network. So here's how my router's performing in terms of response time, and it gives some really, really nice graphs.
Very nice granular data.
Yeah, and I can kind of see that. Well, geez, look, since we started the show, the router's responding a little slower, but it's still under a millisecond, so that's pretty great.
That's pretty reasonable.
Here's the last 30 hours. Boy, I can see at one point I had something going on, right?
Yeah.
So, geez, what's going on there? Well, was that here at my house, or was that something out on the internet? Well, so the next step I have is, here's my ISP, Frontier. Here's their routers when I do a trace route. These are the next guys I talk to. So I can see for the last 3 hours, Frontier, the closest nodes on my network to Frontier, are responding in under 5 milliseconds. So that's pretty great.
That's pretty good.
They did at one point get up to as high as 350 milliseconds on Saturday around 11 p.m. And now I know that, right? And this would be great. Like if I'm having a Skype call with Michael for Coda Radio, or
you can kind of keep an eye on what's going on,
or whoever it might be, whoever needs to Skype in that day. If we're having issues, I can look at this and see what the hell's going on. And then I've broken it out from there. So then I go out to North America. So here's level 3. This is the first router that once I leave my Frontier ISP's network, this is the first router I talk to. Well, here I can see, they're getting about 7 millisecond response time. I can see they had so they had the blip. So that's why my network saw it increase, because they had the blip.
Okay, so it wasn't local.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can do things like I can monitor my connection to important servers. Like here's our connection to the live stream endpoint that I streamed to in Seattle, and I could see there was a little packet loss around 10 a.m. Yeah. It's good to just keep track of, so I know if our stream's dropping, I can, we're having packet loss.
Well, this is great for diagnostics. Yeah.
Here's my connections to Google's DNS. I can see my connection to Google has been good. And then I even have monitoring out to Europe, so I can see, far out connectivity. Yeah. I can see what it's like way out there. So this is Smoke Ping. Once you set up the config file, which is a very easy syntax, and it comes with some examples, you just replace the examples.
Well, that's easy.
You restart it, and then if your server is running all the time, it just does these checks. And if you like charts and,
who doesn't like charts? Right?
Yeah, chart porn's awesome. So this has been great. This has been really, really great. Yeah. So Smoke Ping, I just feel like I kind of have a better idea of how my router's doing, how all of the connections right outside my house are doing.
That's fantastic. And it allows you, the troubleshooting is just fantastic. I love that.
Window into the world, kind of, a little idea of what's going on. If you're going to have a server running all the time, why not?
Yeah.
And if I had my way, and I I have a switch that's pretty nice, and it could do mirrored ports. And if I could have my server next to that switch, I would have a mirrored port.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would use tools like NTOP, and you really get some good analysis. But
fantastic stuff.
Anyway, so boy, we blasted through that because there was so much to cover.
Yeah,
but if we talked about a particular package or software suite, or you want more information, let us know. Linux Action Show at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Also, even more suggestions in our home server ideas thread over on the subreddit.
Yep.
You can go find there. There's 24 good ideas in there. So go check those out.
It keeps growing.
A lot of guys use their home server for a VPN.
Oh yeah,
and I'm considering doing that, but right now
that's one option.
My Usenet provider offers a really great VPN service,
well, then there you go.
That's what I use. But there's different people that have different stuff. So, anyways, check out SmokePing if you want the graphs. Check out SpotWeb, OwnCloud, SAB-NZBD, all that stuff. Oh, backups. I was going to give just a quick mention. I don't use this software, but if you want some backup software for your home network, check out Backup PC.
Okay.
Really good software to do that. And it does some really nice revisioning and differences and stuff like that. And it's super easy to get running on a Linux box. It's got a nice web interface.
Like easy works.
Backup PC. So, there you have it, Matt. That's how you make your Linux home server awesome.
Sweet.
That brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But Matt, before we scoot, we got some emails to cover.
Let's cover.
Okay. So we got a lot of email this week. One of the things that's interesting is we got a lot of emails completely unprompted about how we're going to start covering more applications than distros.
Yeah, I noticed there was a lot of positive feedback.
Yeah. So I'm not going to cover any of that specifically, but thank you everybody who sent in ideas. I'll put a solicitation out there. If you know of a really great Linux desktop app that we haven't talked about, send it in, or a great distro. Because like CineArch, I was just kind of lucky. I was really looking for that, and I came across it. But I know there's new distros cropping up all the time that sometimes miss our radar, and I want to give them credit. So if you know of a good one, email us linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com or start us a Reddit thread. All right, Matt. Our first email came in from Bobby. And he wants to get a list of all the installed packages. Here he goes. He says, "Hello, lass. I've been listening to your show for almost a year now, and I've been getting a lot out of it. I can't tell you the amount of Linux boxes and laptops that I'm now running between home and work." He does actually tell us 6. So the time has come to upgrade some of these to Ubuntu 12.04. Retire some and try other distros on others. But the major issue I'm running into is remembering all of the apps I've installed on my most prized Ubuntu possession.
Well, here's where it gets to be a problem. I mean, if they're all basically Debian in origin, whether it be Ubuntu, Debian, or other derivatives or whatever, there's actually a command you can run to compile a nice little list that you can actually then use that to retrieve software from the repos on other machines. So that makes a nice export option. However, if you're getting into other distros that are not Debian in origin, that presents an interesting challenge.
Yes, and so this will work. So, okay, one thing you can do. Okay, so I guess what I did. I went out. I have a couple ideas.
You got it? Okay.
And but he said he was starting with Ubuntu, right?
Yeah.
So I went over to Ask Ubuntu, and they have a thread on this. And Ask Ubuntu is a great resource if you're an Ubuntu user that gets stuck. What he could do if he just wants a straight up list is he could use the dpkg command.
Yes.
The Debian package command, and then just do --get -selections, and then you could output that to a text file or something like that.
True.
That'll just give you a straight up list of everything you've got installed, okay? Now, if you want to go a little fancier than that, and you're going to move to another Ubuntu box, in the Ubuntu Software Center, there is a synchronized between machines option. And you can go in there, and you just go in there for the first machine, turn that on. It'll upload all of your package installations to the Software Center.
Yep.
You do have to be signed in. You have to have an Ubuntu single sign-on account, so you have to have a Software Center account. And then you go to the other machine after you get it all installed, log in with your same account to the Software Center, go to that synchronized between machines, and it'll list the other machine. And you could say, that's one way to do it if you're just moving between Ubuntu. If you just want to get a list, you check out that dpkg command. We've got that linked in the show notes.
One thing to be aware of with that is that it does tend to it makes a list of everything that you have, and so that may be a little overkill. So that's where using the Software Center comes in handy. Is that you're a little more selective?
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to get you know everything from cat and ls. You're going to get everything.
It shouldn't create a problem, but you never know. If you're going from like Ubuntu to like Xbuntu or something like that, it can get a little funky.
It's a mess.
It can get a little funky.
All right, the next email comes from Cairo. He says, what distro should I switch from Windows from? As a web developer, I already have some experience with Linux, such as my VPS, and I've already started using programs, mostly that are open source, that support both Windows and Linux. And I've surprised myself to find out they're actually better than what I've been using for years and paid thousands for. He says it just like that.
Oh, yeah.
With the imminent release of Windows Fail, I feel that it's time to switch to Linux. But which distro would give me the fastest transition from Windows 7? I can't take days, and I can spare maybe 4 hours, he says, from work to learn a new OS. Ooh. But I do pick things up really quickly, he says. I also have a home server running Windows Home Server 2011, and I want to change that over to Linux as well. Hopefully this episode is helpful to you. Again, which distro should I use? It's my media storage, file server, development, download, backup, cloud repo box, which I administer through RDP. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if he uses XRD. Oh, no, he said it's Windows Home Server. That's right. I need to have RAID 6, and I just want to say hi to Brian and Alan and Matt. And he says, hey, what about those how-to segments? Well, we've kind of incorporated those into the show.
Have. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now that you're sitting here all the time.
Hello, I'm here. No, I think that more than anything, I can't speak to the RAID stuff because I don't spend a lot of time there, and maybe Chris has thoughts on it. But my first two go-to distributions for someone that's coming from Windows is probably going to be Linux Mint, which is, of course, Ubuntu-based and also lower level than that, Debian-based. Or if you want something completely off the wall and different and unique, you might look at PC Linux OS, actually. I've heard a lot of Windows users just find that it's more
and their
natural.
KDE kind of layout is...
Yeah, I mean, for the proper distribution, it's more of a KDE layout. So that's one, and it's really quick. So that's another one to check out, too. I've heard a lot of good things with it.
I'll take heat for this. Everybody's going to say I'm being a fanboy. The reason I was leaning Ubuntu is because I think if you're coming from Windows, one of the things that we take for... that we don't really think about in the transition is... but the new users think about it deeply, is application selection and availability. On Windows is like, it's not even a factor.
That's
right?
True.
You know everything supports Windows. Yeah. Everything has a download for Windows that you want, if you're that type of user. And the closest distribution that matches that particular feature is Ubuntu.
No, it does. It does.
And so if you want to be able to know that you find something that you want to use, and you're almost guaranteed there'll be a package for Ubuntu. Well, so that's one thing to consider. But yeah, I do kind of lean KDE if you want just a straight, sort of more similar Windows experience. Yeah,
and part of the reason why I'm saying Linux Mint is that you get all that core Ubuntu good stuff, but you're not. If you're coming from Windows and you're looking at Unity, you're not going to have a clue. So it's a nice afterthought, but it's not going to happen. I've parked people in front of it; doesn't work. So
that 4-hour window is not going to be realistic, regardless.
So no, it's not. But Cinnamon might make it a little less painful.
Yeah.
And so that's one reason for that. And of course, again, software.
The biggest part I think that trips people up is when they dual boot or they don't commit and they're under pressure, they're under a deadline, they get stuck, and they go, oh, I just got to get this done. I'll reboot into Windows and just do it. And the reality is you've got to stick with Linux and push through those moments because A, the accomplishment of then solving it under Linux sort of energizes you to do it again, and B, that's how you learn, and C, you're never going to stick with it if you don't do it like that. So what I would say is maybe pick a few-day period in your workflow where you can afford some slowdowns.
Exactly.
Expect to continue to work, but just plan for things to take a little longer than you expect until you figure out the rhythm. And if you don't figure out right away, it doesn't mean there's not a way to do it. It just means maybe you're taking the wrong approach to it, and there's a slightly different approach in how you do it under Linux.
Exactly. Set aside a weekend to where you can spend some time in the documentation for the distribution that you've accomplished. Because something as simple as, I don't know, scanning, for instance, with a document scanner. To us, that's a no-brainer. There's a variety of ways to do it. But for someone coming from Windows, they wouldn't even know where to begin.
Maybe. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't see how they would. It's not that clear. So I think that having the opportunity to spend some time with the docs will make your life so much easier, because then you can research those basic things you're doing and basically fast track right into it. So
well said. All right, Matt, our last email today comes from a long-time listener. He wants to let us know about an Android app. Now, I haven't used this app, so I didn't make it an app pick, but I still wanted to let folks know. He says, my buddy wrote this app, and it's going to be a salvation for anybody that's moving from a BlackBerry to an Android device. It is a BlackBerry to Android transfer app that moves all of your settings, moves data, contacts, tasks, notes from BlackBerry into Android. You can get it at toucaneapp.com. And if you're a former BlackBerry user and you want to make the transition, this might help you do it.
Yeah.
So I just want to give him a shout out because he said his buddy had been working on that.
That's really cool. I love the idea because I'm sure there's people out there that are looking to do that.
Yeah, very much so. All right, so if you want to get your feedback into the show, email us, linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Use the contact link at the top of Jupiter Broadcasting or start a Threadit. That's what I'm calling it.
Reddit.
Yep, a Threadit. All right, Matt, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
You can find me, as always, at matthartley.com. I'm a little behind on some of my tutorials, but they're still coming.
It happens.
It happens. And then, of course, more frequently, Datamation, open source channel, datamation.com.
See what you're writing over there.
Yep.
Absolutely. Now, I just want to give a quick mention. If you've checked out Unfilter in the past, and you know that we're always looking for improving our coverage with our foreign areas, so like Europe or really anything that's kind of outside our main focus area. Right. I'm hoping to get some people to send us in some contributions to that show. I'm basically looking for foreign correspondents for Unfilter. We have a voicemail system for Unfilter, so I'd love to get people, like when something breaks that's sort of maybe not really on our radar and they think we need to know about it, I want people to call into the show. I want to really improve the way we're covering stuff around the world. So I'm
new perspectives.
I want to put a call out there. If you want to be a foreign correspondent for Unfilter and leave voicemails from time to time, go over to one of the Unfilter show pages and check out how to get a hold of us. I'd love to hear from you.
Nice.
All right, everyone. Well, the Linux Action Show's live on Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific, which... geez, Matt, what is that? I have it right here. You remember? 1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, 5 p.m. Time zones and me don't get along.
That's why I wrote it down. 1 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. UTC over at jblive.tv for the video feed and jblive.info for the audio feed.
Yes, indeed.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next week. And this, ladies and gentlemen, season 24, episode 2. We're kicking off. We're full into season 24. Woohoo! So you are a cord cutter?
I am a cord cutter.
But you watch. But here we go. Rap segment in 3, in 2.